It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host, and you're joining us in our third of 4 segments this morning. If you're just coming in late, we've been tackling some interesting topics, including Dirty Harry Reid in our first segment, and how he has accused Americans of being liars and telling lies of whole cloth about the true horrors of Obamacare. Wow. All of the stories are untrue, he says. All. Not a single truthful American. We're supposed to believe that Harry Reid is truthful, but millions of Americans are lying. Our second topic was the discussion of this British intelligence member, who's also a barrister over there. By the way, anytime you got a member of the bar, his statements are subject to being questioned because he's got a loyalty to the bar, not to the nation. But anyway, he's exposed that Obama was born in Kenya, not in the United States. The CNA has empirical proof, including DNA tests, that show that Ann was not his mother, that his grandparents and his DNA don't match, even if they're only half his grandparents, the white half on his mother's side. And that lots and lots and lots of people have all of the evidence here, and they're just sitting on it. That alone should be enough from the source now. We're not talking about, some guy who's a blogger sitting in his basement that's done this. We're talking about a guy who's a member of British intelligence. I think it's worthy of a question. But in this topic, we're going to talk about the idea that a House hearing occurred yesterday, and a group of constitutional professors and experts, 3 out of the 4 of whom are Barack Obama supporters, including Jonathan Turley, who, without a doubt, is an Obama. I mean, he states he voted for Obama and that he supports most of his policies. Where he draws the line is the way in the methodology by which Barack Obama is instituting these policies. And at least I will say one thing, and I've read Turley's blog. It's jonathanturley.com. It's Turley. And his first name is Jonathan, Jonathan. But you got to give it to the guy because he openly admits he voted for Barack Obama, that he supports most of his policies. We're talking about the social justice stuff. But he's also enough of a critical thinker, and he has enough integrity to say, but as a constitutional professor, what he's doing, and as a constitutional expert, what he's doing is wrong, and we must stop him. I agree with what he's trying to do, but his method is wrong. See, Turley here is saying that the Machiavellian principle of the end justifies the means is wrong. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, he's right. Nothing justifies bad behavior. You can't get good by doing bad. Last time he testified, which was, a couple weeks ago, here's what he had to say. He was questioned by Bob Goodlatte. He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. By the way, for those of you in Missouri who listen, Jason Smith, our congressman from the 8th District, sits on the Judiciary Committee. So Goodlatte asked him the question. He introduced him, Professor Turley, the Constitution, and the system of separated powers is not simply about stopping one branch of government from usurping another. it is about protecting the liberty of Americans from the danger of concentrated government power. How does the president's unilateral modification of an act of Congress affect both the balance of power between the political branches and the liberty interests of the American people? And Turley answered, "Thank you, Chairman. The danger is quite severe. The problem with what the president is doing is that he's not simply posing a danger to the constitutional system. He's becoming the very danger the Constitution was designed to avoid. That is the concentration of power in every single branch." Now, he went on to say, first of all, I want to bring something to your attention, because this is probably the extension of what Turley was saying, and in large part where he got the idea. This was Thomas Jefferson in a letter. "When all government, domestic and foreign, in little as in great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another, and we will become as venal and as oppressive as the government from which we separated." So what he was saying there is that, and for the record, he was not talking about foreign governments. He was talking about governments within the state, within the federal United States. In other words, the state governments and the federal government being kind of co-merged, if you will. And when all that power is drawn up into Washington alone, and Washington becomes the leader, and the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty is eviscerated, all the checks and balances in our system will be worthless. Turley went on to say, "This Newtonian orbit that the three branches exist in is a delicate one, but it is designed to prevent this type of power concentration. There is two trends going on which should be of equal concern to all members of Congress. One is that we have the radical expansion of presidential powers under both President Bush and President Obama. We have what many once called an imperial presidency model of largely unchecked authority. And with that trend, we also have the continued rise of this fourth branch. We have agencies that are quite large that issue regulations. The Supreme Court said recently that agencies could actually define their own or interpret their own jurisdiction." Now, that quote goes directly to my point that every agency in existence is extra-constitutional in its nature, because we never gave Congress the power to subdelegate our authority, our limited power of attorney to them, onto unelected, unaccountable agencies who don't even take an oath of office, don't take an oath to the Constitution. And this fourth branch of government, by Turley's own admission, the Supreme Court recently gave them permission to define their own jurisdiction and interpret it. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, I don't want to get onto the topic of administrative agencies because we'll get drawn off on that. And you all know, if you listen at any reasonable, for any more than one of these episodes, that administrative agencies, in my opinion, are the absolute downfall of the Republic for the last 100 years. With the creation of these administrative agencies have come massive rules and regulations which even Congress doesn't understand and hasn't passed. And since our Constitution declares emphatically that only Congress can make law, we have a constitutional crisis there too. So that was a couple of weeks ago. Now let's bring it up to date, because we got about 14 minutes left in this segment. They had a second hearing about what they should do. This is the same Judiciary Committee now, and Turley was back. And he's warning that we are facing an imperial presidency. His words, not mine. Quote, the name of this hearing, by the way, is Enforcing the President's Constitutional Duty to Faithfully Execute the Laws. Okay, that's the topic and the subject name of the hearing. And this is on health care, this is on immigration, this is on, the Defense of Marriage Act, the government's failure to honor it. I mean, I had a guy say to me yesterday, well, the Defense of Marriage Act was an executive order. No, it wasn't. Look at the name, Defense of Marriage Act. It was passed by Congress. It just goes to show you, folks, that there is a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of just brash assumptions by people that have no basis in reality. I mean, where does somebody get the idea that DOMA was an executive order? It says Defense of Marriage Act. ACT. That would make it an act of Congress. So, Turley claims that we are by the way, he's a professor at George Washington University. And basically he's stating that we have reached a constitutional tipping point. Now those are his words, folks, not mine. That's a quote. My view is that the president has in fact exceeded his authority in a way that is creating a destabilizing influence in a three-branch system. I want to emphasize, of course, this problem didn't begin with President Obama. I was critical of his predecessor, President Bush, as well. But the rate at which executive power has been concentrated in our system is accelerating. And frankly, I am very alarmed by the implications of that aggregation of power. What also alarms me, however, is that the two other branches appear not just simply passive, but inert in the face of this concentration of authority. And what he was saying there, folks, is that he sees the danger. It's clear for anyone to see. But these two other the two other branches, I should say, the judiciary and the legislative, aren't raising the alarm, and they're not fighting back. In fact, it's even worse. They are sitting there paralyzed in fear. And right now, in Congress, you've heard the statements yourself on the news. They're in what's called analysis paralysis. They don't know what to do. The upshot, by the way, of this hearing is that what they've determined is that impeachment is out of the question because they can't get it through Dirty Harry Reid in the Senate, and the Senate sycophants. But what they are going to do is file a lawsuit. And there are some legislative things that they're trying to do which would force, as an example, the courts to fast-track this stuff, to get it straight to the Supreme Court, as an example, which, frankly, will never work because it's going to take Congress and the entire Senate to approve of that legislation. So you can bet that's never going to happen. The truth of the matter is they don't need a piece of legislation to do this. This Congress can take this straight to the Supreme Court. They did it during don't you remember during the Bush and Gore election issue, where they went to the Supreme Court to get it settled because it was a matter of such national importance. It affected the election, and we couldn't remember, we didn't even have a president for a while, really. Well, this is no different. This is a president who has, for all intents and purposes, become our greatest fear. A tyrannical imperialist who is acting in a dictatorial fashion. They don't need some piece of legislation to drag this before the Supreme Court. I think it's more of a stall tactic than anything. He went on to say, the fact that I happen to think the president is right on many of these policies does not alter the fact that I believe the means by which he is doing it is wrong, and that this can be a dangerous change in our system. And our system is changing in a very fundamental way, and it's changing without a whimper of regret or opposition. This November, you should have that emblazoned on your forehead. Congress is allowing this change without a whimper of regret or opposition. In November, what are you going to do? Elizabeth Price Foley. She's another law professor that was there. She is an educator at the Florida International University College of Law. And she basically stated that Congress has become superfluous. Now, if you define the word superfluous, it means unnecessary. Here she says, quote, situations like this, these benevolent suspensions, as they get more and more frequent and more aggressive, they're eroding our citizens' respect for the rule of law. And she's right. Listen, when the laws become so numerous and confusing, and there is no respect for the rule of law by those who declare the law to be the law itself, but exempt themselves from it, if they have no respect for the rule of law, why should we? She goes on to say, we are a country of law and not men. It's going to render Congress superfluous. She went on and said, he is simply benevolently suspending portions of the law he doesn't like. And she was talking there about the issues of Obamacare and immigration, where he's just unilaterally declared, well, we're not going to deport them. We don't have to. We're not going to follow the law. She went on to look at Congress and said to them, if you want to stay relevant as an institution, I would suggest you not stand idly by and let the president take your power away. Now, you all heard me comment on this in a previous segment or episode or whatever you want to call it, in which after the State of the Union address, I expressed my incredulity that the president said, and he said this not in one but in two State of the Union addresses, that I am going to bypass Congress with my phone and my pen, essentially, and I'm going to act where they won't. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a threat. It wasn't a statement. It was a threat. Since you won't acquiesce to my demands, I will simply go around you. And I could not believe my eyes. I watched the entire leftward side of the audience stand up and clap for their own demise. Twice. They are already irrelevant. Now, Gerlach, from Pennsylvania, said impeachment is, quote, surely extremely divisive within the Congress and the nation generally, and it would divert the attention of Congress from other important issues of the day. With all due respect, Mr. Gerlach, and I'm not suggesting that impeachment's the solution because you'll never get it through the Senate, but I got to tell you something. There is no other more important issue of the day. Despite the fact that you had Ben Affleck in for a congressional hearing on the collapse of the Republic of Congo, how about the collapse of the Republic of the United States of America? Is that not a more important issue? Oh, my gracious. Ladies and gentlemen, our country is coming apart by the minute. I am... Okay, I'm going to sum this segment up with this, and I'm going to use Turley's own words. The growth of the executive power is accelerating, and it has brought us to a constitutional tipping point. I want you to hear it again. I believe we are now at a constitutional tipping point in our system. It's a dangerous point for our system to be in, and I believe that your response has to begin before this president leaves office. No one in our system goes it alone. While I agree with the president on most of his policies, it does not alter the fact that I believe the means by which he is doing it is wrong, and that this continued acceleration is a dangerous change in our system. It is simply untrue that based on the president's claims that we're living in different times. Quote, "It is simply untrue that we're living in very different or unprecedented times. The framers lived in these times. This is not a different political time, and it shouldn't be used as an excuse for extra constitutional action." Folks, we are beyond salvage on a political basis at this point, I believe, with this Congress. This election is going to determine whether the United States of America collapses into a civil conflict that will once again force the watering of the tree of liberty with the blood of American citizens and tyrants alike, or whether there is some means and method by which, under the current Constitution, this Congress can maybe separate itself from its own suicidal rush. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to tackle our last topic, which is basically going to be the stories that are so numerous out there that I just want to tap onto some of these headlines because there's just a fire hose of them. We'll be right back.